You're forced back in your seat as the thrust of twin jet engines boost you from the aircraft carrier to the top of the world.
The world looks different from up in an airplane. When you're totally in control of that fantastic machine that Uncle Sam has let you fly, it's just an exhilaration it's hard to beat.
Flying through the sky, there's nothing around but you, your plane, blue sky, and enemy fighters on the horizon.
It made your heart beat a little faster, especially when you're tooling around or in the target area and someone begins to call out aircraft. You know, there's 12 of them up there at 2 o'clock high. You know, okay, there's another 20 of them over there at 10 o'clock low. You can tell the pitch of the person who's calling them, and it rises up a little bit as he gets more and more excited. And then if they come down, of course, you drop your tanks and break into them, and then the fight's on.
These airmen take to the sky, taking out enemy targets, supporting ground troops, and fortifying our freedoms. From the first propeller planes to today's Mach 2 F-18 Super Hornets, wealth in the air flies through the history books to see these old warbirds and talk to the heroes who flew missions aboard the wings of wartime.
Some of those guys were 18 years old when they got into flight training. They said they volunteered to do it because they could shorten the war. They felt they could shorten the war, and they meant that sincerely. That men were ready to sacrifice, risk all on behalf of our nation.
Through the world wars in Vietnam, the Korean War, through the Gulf War, our servicemen and women took off on missions to serve and protect, with only their planes for protection.
In May of '44, our crew started flying combat missions. Our crew flew 32 missions in just 77 days. We were very fortunate. None of the crew was ever injured. We'd get holes in the airplane, but no holes in the crew.
I got hit by two rounds, and it actually shuttered the aircraft, but I got hit in the right engine. So, and my wingman told me I was on fire, and it was pretty clear that I was on fire because everything in the cockpit basically lit up.
Whether flying World War II bombers or today's fighter jets, these warbirds serve the pilots and our country well.
The airplanes did what generals have dreamed about since the beginnings of warfare, and that was it gave them the ability to know exactly where their adversaries were and what their formations were, where their concentrations of strength were. Pretty soon, the reconnaissance pilots began to meet opposing reconnaissance pilots, and at first they carried sidearms and would shoot at each other, and before long they were actually installing guns on the airplanes, and that was the birth of the fighter plane.
Fighter planes like the famous North American P-51 Mustang, most often accompanying long-range World War II bomber missions.
There's an old saying among fighter pilots, if an airplane looks good, it probably flies good. And you'll never find a better looking airplane, better, in my opinion, than the P-51. It looks like it's going 300 miles an hour just sitting on the ramp.
The P-51s changed the course of the war, but original Mustangs had visibility problems. Later models of the fighter had a modified canopy, increasing the pilot's scope of vision.
I made a shuttle run to Russia, and when we landed in Russia, we were met by a Russian general with an interpreter. And he walked around the airplane and looked at that canopy, and he walked around the other side and he looked at that canopy. And then he said to the interpreter, and she told us, that he said, with visibility like that, he wouldn't mind dying in this airplane, which I thought was high praise indeed.
High praise for the P-51, and for this captain of the clouds, whose 61 missions in the Mustang earned him ace status.
In order to become an ace, you must shoot down 5 enemy airplanes out of the air. And I was fortunate enough to have 11 confirmed kills.
The Mustang is credited with 9,311 air, ground, and V-1 kills, making the P-51 the aircraft of the aces.
So I flew all my combat in the P-51. It's an old friend. It's an old friend.
There's more warbirds on deck when Wings of Wartime continues.